Actually, we'll be interviewing as a team.
You are the best movers on the planet. So, bro, what kind of muscles you have? No. Bro, what kind of patterns you have?
We're here to fuck shit up.
11 it is, a Movement Athlete Podcast. I'm Dr. Wes Hendricks.
I'm John Lindsey.
All right, so John, I think you and I just decided we're going to talk about chin-up development. Chin-up, pull-up, they're one and the same. We were going to talk about what that process looks like from a strength and mobility perspective, from a complete beginner all the way up to getting your first chin-up, and then maybe what to do to start progressing from your 1 rep max to multiple reps, so then you could take it to more advanced things like muscle ups and one arm chin ups, like we've already talked about on previous episodes.
Yeah. So where do you want to start this? You want to start this at, essentially, I would imagine, complete beginner, like maybe you can hang from a bar for 20 seconds, but they're really lacking even the initiation of the pull.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, because even with the first phase, stage, mesocycle, whatever we want to call it to sound smart, we can even regress that. So like the first phase that I'm going to talk about here, or series of exercises, really are approachable for anyone regardless of skill, strength, ability level. So where I like to start with this, and I think we've probably discussed this in previous episodes as well, I like to solidify the starting position and the ending position prior to moving through a range of motion. So the starting position is a dead hang. The ending position's technically a dead hang again, because you start and finish the pull-up from that hang. But for the purpose of this, I'm saying the finishing position is the top of the pull-up. So the finishing position would be holding the top of that chin-up position or pull-up position. So I like to solidify both of those positions to start. Can we hear me good? How's my mic doing? Because I've been putting this mic in my face more.
I think you sound good.
Okay, good. I appreciate the encouragement.
The listeners will give us the real feedback, but you sound good.
Perfect. I feel more confident already. So the starting position, kind of like John already said, it can simply just be a hang. If you have, if hanging's already challenging for you, then let's hang. The things that I like to talk about with hanging, really my only caveat with hanging is thumb around the bar. I want people to be able to grip it so you can actually progress and strengthen your grip strength, as opposed to that suicide thing where your thumb isn't wrapped around the bar. You're not going to initiate a grip there. If you're going to unscrew a jar, grip a barbell heavy, squeeze someone's hand, you're going to use your thumb, because it's going to engage all your forearm muscles. It's going to go up the big word here, kinetic chain, use your shoulder muscles as well. So use that grip when you're hanging from a bar. Is it uncomfortable? Sure, it's uncomfortable at first, but you'll get used to it. So with hanging, thumb around the bar. Then from there, let's just keep it simple. Just slowly start progressing it. You're building grip strength. You're working on your mobility. I know you work with a lot of older individuals as well. Hanging is really accessible for just about everyone. Would you say so?
Yeah, it's very, it's so scalable, and it's funny. It's a tool up until a few years ago I never even thought of as like what the benefits of it were. But I mean, even with my older clientele, 70s, 80-year-olds, we're able to get them either on a set of rings or a bar that I can lower low enough where they can still have just a couple toes on the floor, and they're able to apply as much, they can self-regulate that and apply as much body weight to the shoulders as they want to. Or even if you have a gym that has one of those assisted pull-up machines, those are awesome for hanging, because you can just set a weight that gives you just a little bit of assistance, and then over time you're able to, all right, I used 50 pounds of assistance today, next week let's try 40, let's try 30, until we're at the real thing. So it's very scalable for anybody, and you can progress super quickly if you put in the time on that.
So I love that you're using that machine, because honestly, any way you can get creative when it comes to body weight exercises, whatever it is. And keep in mind, a body weight exercise for somebody is going to be hanging, depending on your, injury, previous training history, your age, your weight. There's a lot of factors that we could be looking at there, but hanging can be challenging for someone. And it's no different than, like most people just can't hop into a one-arm chin-up. But it's hard to find these in-between progressions with body weight exercises is where I'm going with this. As opposed to a barbell, you can add 1-2 pounds and progress it safely in these small increments. But with body weight stuff, a lot of the times we're forced to start with our own body weight, which for some people can be really unmanageable. So any little tricks like that, whether it's, what you were talking about, the pull-up machine, using bands, or I even like what you just brought up with that spotted variation. These are all things to keep in mind with just about any body weight exercise to progress it along, because the steps or the progressions with them, going from one progression to the next can seem such a large jump. It's the equivalent of sometimes, in my opinion, adding 50 to 100 pounds to a barbell. You just wouldn't all of a sudden add 50 pounds to the barbell. Nobody's going to do that if you're going for a new max. So it's just something to keep in mind. I don't know. I'm sure it has some relevance to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, no, I like that. And as far as hanging goes, I tell people, if you get on the bar and you're freaking out immediately and you're like, oh shit, put a foot down or get on the assisted machine and build up to where you can handle 20 seconds at some level of assistance, then drop the assistance from there. Have some level of competency at that stage before you progress. Especially with hanging, people can if they haven't been overhead like that, the second you kind of jump up there, the second you let go of your feet, you might freak out. So progress it slowly, but over the course of a week or 2 weeks, you might surprise yourself by how much you progress.
Yeah. And then let's say you're comfortable with hanging. The next step or stage there with solidifying that starting position, in my opinion, would be hanging scapular retractions. John and I have both talked about this, I guarantee, on our page. You've posted about this before, right?
I probably have, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say I have too. Don't quote me on that. So hanging scapular retractions, elbows are locked out. All you're doing is pulling your shoulder blades essentially down and back while you're hanging. Your head's going to raise up. So let's say your ears are, in line with your shoulders, as you pull your shoulder blades down and back, your head will raise up. So maybe your ears are in line with closer to your elbow now. I have no idea if that's a good description there, but that's what I'm going with. And what that's going to do is we're going to initiate the pull-up or the chin-up from a retracted scapula. We want to start with that initiation. So this is a good place to start in terms of working on patterning it to figure out what that feels like, because a lot of people don't even realize the motion of down and back with the scapula to initiate the movement. And then once you have that pattern down or that rhythm down, you can start strengthening it with, sets, reps, holding it at the top, accumulating some nice amount of volume with it.
Yeah, and that's something if you were still not super comfortable totally passive hanging, or maybe you're in the process of losing some weight and hanging just isn't possible, you can the same drills just described with your feet still on the ground. And you just self-regulate how much weight is in the shoulders. So if your goal is pull-ups, but you're still not past that passive hang benchmark yet, you can still work what Wes is describing. And that's going to build some scapular strength to make you more comfortable at passive hanging too. So don't be scared to try that as well if you're not comfortable passive hanging, because there is a way to scale that for anyone to be able to do.
That's actually a really good point. That got me thinking that on top of doing it kind of how you described it as spotted, you could also simply do it in a horizontal position too, because that horizontal position is going to be less stressful as the vertical. So think about the top of a ring row, and I'm not talking about like an advanced ring row where your torso is parallel to the ground. Think incline, think about the body position you'd put in maybe one of your older clients for ring rows, or you don't use TRXs, do you?
We do a little bit, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if you guys had it or not. Yeah, but same thing, and it's just it's a lower threshold environment, lower demand to start working on that pattern, because hanging, you're essentially shrugging or doing a foreign motion with your scapula with all of your own body weight, and that can be challenging at first for a lot of people. I think maybe some of our listeners might take that for granted, but for complete beginners, that could be extremely challenging. So for the trainers listening to this, there's a bunch of ways to manipulate those variables so we can start working on that scap retraction. So for the most part, I'd say we we hit home that starting position, whether it's going to be some variation of hanging, or if we want to progress it, the more advanced variation would be some sort of scap retraction work to start or initiate that pull-up, because we want to start it with some sort of scapular motion. So then if we start looking at the top position of the chin up, or, a chin over the bar hold, we can say, we want to be able to accumulate some time under tension in that isometric position. I think it's a good place to start before doing eccentrics, mainly because it's tongue twist. It's an isometric, so there's going to be no joint shearing. There's not going to be any sliding of tissue surfaces. We theoretically aren't causing inflammation. So isometrics are a safer bet to start, whether we're coming back from injury even, or in fact, if we're introducing somebody to a new movement, because too much too soon is how we're going to end up with an injury. Especially when we're starting to place these new demands on the elbows, shoulders, upper back. I'd much rather start with that isometric as opposed to just chin up negatives, because I think we can run into issues if we just jump ahead to chin up negatives.
So let me stop you real quick. Do you prefer rings or bar for someone at this stage, or does it matter?
It really doesn't matter for the top position, because at the top position of those, assuming the rings, you're going to be in a supinated position at the top, at the top of a chin up. I don't want people trying to do a pronated pull up at the top of the rings, because it's more challenging with the rings. It's kind of weird or awkward to do a pronated position. Like if you've ever tried to do pronated pull-ups on rings, it's weird.
It's not as natural.
Yeah, really. But for the purpose of this, you can absolutely use rings for that bottom position and that top position. And maybe even the rings for the top position would be more beginner friendly for some people that lack that forearm supination position. Because that supinated hand position is really tough on the radius and the ulnar, or that forearm, if you're not used to it, if it's a completely new movement. So to hold that top position can be strenuous. So those rings can, it gives you a little more, let's say, leeway. So you can almost be in a semi-supinated position. So by all means, you could use the rings for this stage in the development, in my opinion.
Cool. And they're very adjustable too, so you can get to that top position easier because you can lower them to the height you need where your feet are still on the ground, and then as you feel able, you've got that position secured, you can slowly take your feet away from the ground. Yeah,
and that's a really good point, because also, let's say I just took a deep breath. I'll be interested to see if it shows up on the mic there. But what I was saying is that's a good point, because kind of how you were talking about, people can do the hanging or the scapular retraction spotted on their tippy toes. We can just as easily do what I program for a lot of my clients is called spotted isometrics. So they're just holding that chin over the bar position, but they're just kind of lightly on their tippy toes, and they're performing an isometric contraction. And what's going to happen is over time, they're just going to continue performing that isometric contraction, and they'll slowly be taking weight off their feet until one day they more or less start what I tell them is floating, where their feet start to come off the ground gradually. And then before they know it, they're holding that top position with the chin over the rings, or most of the time chin over the chest to rings or chest to bar is the ideal position, because we're really solidifying that top range. So by all means, if you're not capable, and this is what I was getting at when I started saying that this phase or this series of exercises can be totally scalable, you can start off by all means performing these spotted for an extended period of time to build the correct isometric strength, as opposed to just jumping straight into full body weight chin over the bar holds.
So what sort of, let's say, kind of the stuff we've described so far is what this example of a person is working on? Maybe some passive hang, maybe a little active hang with the scapular retractions, and also this over the bar work. What's that programming look like? Like what's that going to look like?
Honestly, I'd start people. I did it again. I took that breath. I'm really going to know if I'm just muffling the shit out of this mic, because I'm really making an effort to be close to it.
I could hear it a little bit, so we'll see.
Okay, we'll see. We're going to get all these bad ratings now. It's my fault. It's not yours. So what would the programming look like? All right, I'm getting distracted here. Programming. I'd probably start someone off in the range of 3 to 5 sets, and that's generally where I like to start people off. 3 to 5 sets, let's say 5 reps of the hanging scapular retraction. I generally like to throw in a 3-second hold at the top. I say 3 seconds because most people are just stupid and they can't count, and they hold it for 1 second. If I was to say 1 second, they wouldn't hold it at all. So I just want people, squeezing. I want them holding that top position long enough so they're squeezing their scapula together. So 3 seconds is a safe bet that someone's going to hold it for 1 second. So, 5 reps of that. And then I would start people off with, let's say, a 10-second isometric hold at the top there for those chin over the bars or chest to bar holds, whether they're going to be spotted, whether they're going to be non-spotted. That's a good range to start where we're not working too close to our max too soon. It's a good, I'm going to say rep range there, but it's not reps. Time. It's a good time frame. It's a good amount of time under tension. So I'd start people there for that. And then I actually have a question for you. Because honestly, there's a good amount of shoulder mobility that comes into play here, being able to hold that top position, with that amount of thoracic spine extension, with the elbows going behind us, and even that hanging position at top. Where would you like to start? Because like a lot of the times I like to finish up after I do those hanging scapular retractions and isometric holds. I like to follow up with a little bit of mobility and some accessory work. And accessory work, you and I have already talked about it, probably in the form of, let's say, Cuban rotations. But what mobility work would you want for somebody that's just starting off with that goal of chin-ups or pull-ups?
Yeah, some sort of loaded shoulder external rotation work, like a Cuban rotation would definitely be in there. I think that's the number one shoulder accessory drill for the pull-up. Other than that, I mean, if you've got a partner to work with, I really like working shoulder flexion / elevation when you have a partner behind you and you're just reaching up to their fingertips, really getting the shoulders super elevated. That's going to get you more comfortable with the dead hang position. I think that's a fabulous accessory drill. You could even start with that too to kind of get the scapula warmed up before they're in that stretched out position. So just you're sitting on the ground, a partner's behind you, and you're reaching your arms up overhead to tap their fingertips. A couple rounds of 10 taps could really, really loosen up the shoulders. And you're building strength in that range because you're yourself lifting into that range. So you're building the strength through that range.
That's do you have a video of that? Have you ever filmed one with like Caitlin or another client? Because that's a really
I haven't, but I do that drill with like 50% of my clients.
I honestly absolutely love it. And when I do it and when I stand behind it, because I recently just did it with a client that was in town. He was visiting, so we set up a one-on-one so we could go over some stuff. And I warmed him up for handstand work to kind of feel what it feels like to really elevate the shoulders, and get that trap activation. I use that drill to warm him up. And the thing that I really like to do too, partially because I'm a dick, but also because there's some benefit, when I'm standing behind them, I like to take my knee and basically shove it in between their scapula to really promote that T-spine extension there. Really, it gets the job done.
Totally. Don't let them lean back.
Well, absolutely. And the funny thing is, as I'm thinking about this, I have a video on my YouTube, on my private page of this exact drill, but it's with I think I used Lauren as a demo, so I don't know if I can.
We'll bleep that out.
Well, it's a really good, that for the listeners who don't know, that's an X. So I don't know if I can, but yeah, it's a good drill there. And I love it. Well, one of us will have to get that out for people because it's kind of hard to visually see, but honestly, it's phenomenal, especially for people working with people in person. It's such a phenomenal drill because, we can give people all these verbal cues, but it's like I'm shoving my knee in someone's scapula, reach up, touch my hands. It's self-correcting. You're going to accomplish the goal. I love that you included that one because I wouldn't have thought about that. I didn't mean to interrupt. What else do you have there?
I would, if you've got the stamina, I would just get back on the bar and hang a little bit more. I feel like there's nothing that the passive hang on the bar is a great mobility drill in itself, especially if you've got the strength to hang on for at least a couple rounds of 15 to 20 seconds. And if your goal is chin-ups, like that's going to be what's going to help you out more than anything to me. So if you can handle a couple more rounds of passive hanging at the end of a session or the next day, That's what I would go with. I think that's going to translate better than anything else.
I like it. John, well, something happened there. I like that. You're basically utilizing the SAID principle. Genius. You're keeping it simple.
Keep it simple.
So I think people that are listening, whether or not they want their first chin up or whether they're training people, I think that's a great place to start for that first phase. I'm not saying that's it and we're going to end the podcast on that. Maybe if also you want to include after those hanging scapular retractions and the holds and before the mobility work, maybe some ring rows just as a little more dynamic work. By all means, ring rows would be great too. But I think that's a pretty solid session. Maybe as I'm kind of thinking about this before we close this section out, maybe also bicep work. I really like bicep curls. It's for multiple reasons. It strengthens the elbow tendons. Who doesn't like getting a bicep pump? And they play a pivotal role in that second half of the chin up once our arms are about parallel to the floor. So there's no harm in throwing in some bicep work early on.
And if you've done the ring rows, then you obviously have rings. So just do some ring bicep curls right after that. They're probably set up at a similar height, so you're already ready to go.
Look at that. And we definitely went over that hack in our gym episode that you can use those rings for a number of exercises. But I think we did good there. So I think if I was going to move on to the next one and understand to move on to the next one, I probably want to have somebody have 5 sets of 10 seconds clean isometric holds at the top. It's definitely, in my opinion, it's overdoing it. You could get away with starting to move into eccentrics, was where I'm going with this next. You could probably get into eccentrics way sooner, but what's the rush? I'd much rather have people over-prepared before I move them to the next phase, as opposed to, barely good enough or under-prepared. So then when they're starting to do the eccentrics, we could potentially run into issues. So I just like to, we'll say, over-prepare. So let's say 5 sets, 10-second holds at the top, getting pretty close to chest to bar too. I say chest to bar because a lot of times when you see people doing these chin over the bar holds, their chins are like barely clearing the plane of the bar, and they're just cranking on their neck and kind of doing whatever they can to get that chin to clear it.
Yeah.
So I like chest for that too, because it's
pull the bar to your chest.
Yeah, you're owning that range of motion, and even if the bar is 3 inches away from your chest, your chin is. I'm trying to combine a lot of words there. Your chin is clearly clearing the bar, so you're fine there. But yeah, I think that's the only point I was making. So moving on, the next phase would be I would start working through a range of motion. So now we'd start doing eccentric chin-ups. In terms of sets, reps, accessory work for that, I'd probably start people off with 5 seconds and slowly progress to 10 seconds. I'd start off just, let's say, 1 rep, 5 sets. I don't like to, once again, do too much too soon. I'm super conservative when it comes to introducing new movements, because you're way more likely to get hurt, in my opinion, from doing too much too soon as opposed to performing, quote unquote, a bad rep. So that's where I'd start, is simply, your primary exercise would be eccentrics.
And what did you say on obviously you're doing singles, like is there a rep range you're hitting? What's the rest intervals between those reps? Dive into that a little bit.
Okay, yeah. So with that, I'd probably start off, like I said, 5 sets, 1 set of 5 seconds, slowly progressing up to 10 seconds. Once you get to 10 seconds, then you could probably drop back down to 5 seconds and start doing, let's say, 2 reps. And there's a lot of different numbers thrown out there that I've read in a few textbooks. I don't want to say chat rooms, because I don't want to say chat rooms or forums. I've read on the internet as well. A lot of the times people say when you can do 3 10-second eccentrics in a row. So actually, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. If you can
No
do
rest.
yeah, basically no rest. And there's a lot of intermediate stages we could cover between there. But if you could do 3 10-second eccentrics of a chin up, you should theoretically have the strength to do a chin up. Whether or not that
Yeah,
holds.
that sounds harder than doing just one chin up.
Yeah. So keep in mind though, with eccentrics, and the reason why we're moving to eccentrics next is because you're somewhere in the range of like 1.3 to 1.5 times stronger in the eccentric movement pattern as opposed to the concentric. So if you have a very good command over that eccentric for multiple reps at 10 seconds, it's going to lend itself to being able to do a concentric no problem. And once again, I think that recommendation that I've read is probably in what you said. It sounds harder. It's probably overkill, but by the time you can accomplish that, you're more prepared and ready to not only start doing concentrics, but probably working multiple reps in a session. So I'd probably, like I said, start at that 10. Once you can progress to the 10 seconds, drop it back down and start doing doubles at 5 seconds. And you could think of it like a cluster, 10, 15 seconds in between reps. Because you got to climb back up onto the box, get yourself set up at the top, maybe get a little more chalk. It doesn't need to be like immediate. We're not doing a CrossFit workout by any means, but I also don't want people checking Instagram in between the reps too. So 10, 20 seconds in between those clusters is more than enough time where it's still doing its job of multiple reps of eccentrics.
Would you ever do any sequence where you've done the eccentric, you stay on the bar, and then you just reactivate the active hang? I know that's a common for like one arm eccentrics, a much more advanced drill, but you perform the eccentric, and then when you're at the bottom, you just re-engage the scapula, initiating the pull. Would that be beneficial for this?
Yeah,
the clientele we're talking about now?
Absolutely. That would be probably it'd be more in the later stage of the eccentrics once you have a good command of it, because it's still challenging a good amount of grip strength. And we're already fatiguing them with the eccentric. So then to fatigue them further in the bottom position, I wouldn't do it for someone just starting eccentrics, but as you're busting out multiple reps of eccentrics, absolutely. You'd be increasing capacity. So I don't know. I'd be curious if I've ever used that before. I'd have to look at the programs I've written, but if not, I'm going to start using that. I like that.
Yeah. So we've got this guy, they're doing eccentrics. Maybe at this point now they can hit 1 or 2 full chin-ups. What are you starting to program as they're able to get 1 or 2, maybe 3 reps in a session?
Yeah. So if they can start to do a few reps in the session, you can do 1 of 2 things. We can start to squeeze out a little more volume in the session. So if let's say you do 3 concentric reps, and then after that you just, the quality goes down, you can grab a light band. And I'm not talking about a band that, I always use this phrase or analogy or saying, don't use a band that has so much tension it could launch a small dog 50 feet into the air. I'm talking the thin band, I don't want to say colors because people get hung up on the colors because every company uses a different band.
Usually orange.
Yeah.
I think usually the lighter the color, the lighter the band, I think.
The fact that you even recognize some pattern with the color and the tension in the bands is quite impressive.
Well, the darker ones look scarier, so unnecessary.
It's a good point. But yeah, so I know you use for your Nordic curls an orange band, and generally the one up from orange is red. So I'm talking about those two. You can accumulate more reps that way with that thin band. You could also, if you've got a training partner or you're training a client, by all means, kind of spot them lightly from the back of their feet just to get them a little assistance. And then slowly over the course of 4 to 8 weeks, you slowly start adding in more of those assisted reps till eventually we can accumulate, let's say 10 to 15 singles, quality singles, whether, half of them are maybe with no assistance, and then we're getting some assistance on the side there too. At that point in time, then you're probably about ready for start doing some doubles, whether it's 2 sets of 3, 2 reps by 4 sets, and just slowly over time following a basic linear progression. It doesn't need to be anything crazy at this point in time. And you could really follow that all the way up to 5 by 5 before we start worrying about adding weighted chest to bar chin-ups or anything like that.
Yeah, and a variation, if you don't have a band or a partner to work with, I really like having and your bar is low enough, your rings are low enough, having a box slightly offset to where you're pulling. And if you can break at least 90 degrees with your elbows, putting a foot on that box and getting yourself up the rest of the way, solidifying the top position, and then performing the eccentrics. So especially if you're able to get maybe 1, 2, 3 reps as you get later into your progress and you still want to start that pulling and get as far as you can unassisted, you can then just tap your foot over to the side, use the box to get up the rest of the way and still perform a really nice eccentric too. I know I myself was working a variation of that a few months ago when I was just trying to get a lot of volume of pulling in. As I'd get fatigued, to make sure every rep was solid at the top, I'd just set a step ladder off to the side and would finish the rep like that.
You're coming in hot today with all these variations I've never heard of. It's pretty impressive. You're on your game.
I don't think I made that one up, but I can't remember where I found it.
No, we're giving you the credit. We heard it first here.
Really helps you lock in that top position for sure if you have a box set up enough.
Absolutely. And then even another way, if you can only get, are we having internet issues?
It says it's unstable. Uh-oh.
Oh.
Now it's not saying that, so that's
okay. Good. Even after, if you're at the point where you can knock out 1, 2, 3 in a session, after that, just go back to the eccentrics and continue to accumulate those eccentrics. And each session, you should be able to add an additional rep to it. I would just really focus on taking your time and, once again, not doing too much too soon and not being a dumbass, but that should be obvious. And honestly, the accessory work when you're at the eccentric stage, or even as you start adding in your singles and start building up your single capacity, the accessory work would probably be about the same as John and I already talked about in terms of the mobility, throwing in some of that rotator cuff work with Cuban rotations, following it up with some ring rows. Because as you start getting into some higher volume pulling stuff with the as we start accumulating concentric reps and then doing eccentric reps, it's definitely a good practice to get into, to balance it out with some horizontal pulling, because you were just doing all this vertical pulling in the shoulder joint. Balance it out with some horizontal. We don't need to get too much more scientific or overcomplicate it too much. It's just different angles of pull. You have a less of a chance of developing some sort of overuse injury. So that's why I like to follow up a lot of my my vertical pulling with horizontal. If you're in a gym, by all means, use a cable machine. Absolutely. It's going to give you a different loading curve as opposed to what ring rows would give you. So there's nothing wrong with doing a cable machine. Do barbell rows, dumbbell rows, have at it. All of them are going to get you stronger, which is going to lend itself to stronger pull-ups and a healthier shoulder.
Cool. I like any final thoughts. I mean, I think that's pretty much kind of takes you from ground zero all the way up to not a mastery of the pull-up, but definitely a solid base and ready to advance to the muscle ups, the one-arm variations after that.
Yeah, the probably a closing thought, I would stick with supinated or chin up. So whenever I say chin up, I'm referring to a supinated position, or your palms facing you. And a pull-up is pronated, where the palms are facing away from you. That's just kind of how I think of it, but I wanted to clarify that. And the thing people typically recognize is that a chin-up is going to be easier than a pull-up, because it's easier to develop more leverage with your elbows, your biceps in that chin-up position as opposed to that pull-up position. In my experience with specifically female clients that want to, they want to get good at the pull-up, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with choosing or identifying that you want to be like a pull-up ninja. For those people that have the goals of improving pull-ups, I actually, for the most part, neglect training the actual pronated pull-up for a very long time. I get people very, very consistent and very competent at the chin-up, probably up to sets of 8 before I even worry about that pronated position. Because honestly, once we can knock out multiple sets of 8 of the chin-up, there's a little bit of a pattern difference with that pronated, and it feels a little awkward at first, but we have all the strength, all the capacity already there in the scapula, elbows, the shoulders. So it's a nice, easy transition, as opposed to what I've found is if you're training pronated pull-ups and you're working lower rep ranges, it's much more challenging on those scapular muscles at first, and the elbows tend to drift in front of us too much and put a lot of shear stress on the elbow joint, which can give us some tendonitis issues in the elbows. So I think the chin up is a much better route to go, especially at first, if you want to become a pull-up ninja, let's say. So I would train those more even to get better at pronated pull-ups, and that's just been my experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if you are if you've kind of got the chin up down, the supinated grip, and you want to try the pull-ups, that box technique I was describing with the where you just tap a foot on a box to kind of solidify that top position, that's a great way to solidify the top position in a pull-up. Because that kind of tends to be the toughest spot for people, is they can't lock it out. They can't get that chest totally to the bar there. So having a box or a step ladder nearby to build the strength and get all the way to the top is a great way to bridge the gap there.
Yeah. And another thing you can do is, because what we talked about in the beginning, we were saying that the rings are great for ring chin-ups in terms of holding that top position, because you can be supinated. But we were saying that the rings are kind of awkward to do pronated pull-ups with. What the rings are great for, though, is because you can start in a pronated position for those pull-ups on the rings. You can initiate the movement with a pronated hand position, and then you can slowly, as you pull yourself up, transition to a supinated position. So you're going to kind of move in what we could call the path of least resistance, because you're going to start with your hands facing away from you, and they're going to be facing towards you at the top of that ring chin up. So it's kind of the ring chin up is a combination of a chin up and a pull up, in my opinion. So it's this nice hybrid version that if people are struggling from transitioning from chin up to pull up, it's a nice intermediate step. So that's a great utilization of those rings. It's a great tool to have that ring being able to rotate, in my opinion. And I'm sure you've used that with a lot of your older individual clients too, to take stress off their wrist and their shoulder joint, for that matter. Yeah,
totally. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think we covered everything. I'm pretty happy about this. I don't know if I could say anything else.
Yeah, I mean, follow this to a T, and if you don't have a pull-up or a chin-up, you'll definitely get one. And if you're looking to go from the eccentrics to the real thing, you're good to go. And if you've gotten your chin up and you are ready to get a little more advanced, we did a muscle up episode a couple episodes ago, so check that out as well.
That's a good point. We should have probably done this in a more planned order, where we started with pull-ups and then jumped to muscle-ups.
Well, it's okay. we're still figuring out the whole podcasting thing, so
we're staying consistent. That's what counts here. And guys, if you have questions on this, by all means, shoot myself or John a DM. We'd be happy. Tag us in any videos if you start trying to train the pull-ups, and we'll definitely give you our opinion on it too. It's definitely a good skill to have. I think everyone should be able to have the capacity to pull their self to the top of a bar.
Yeah, agreed. So if you guys are liking the podcast, give us a rating, a review, subscribe, download, share it on Instagram. We'll reshare it on our stories. We love seeing that stuff. Anything to support us, we appreciate. And if you have any topics you'd want us to dive into, send us a message on it, and we might do it. So look out for the episode next week. And I think we will be doing a mailbag here pretty soon. So be on the lookout for myself, or maybe myself and Wes, posting about some questions for that. So I think that wraps it up. Be on the lookout next week for another great episode.